I was sitting in a conference room last week, watching a colleague get backed into a corner. He made a mistake, a visible, expensive one. And the department head was just starting to twist the knife. The spreadsheets were projected on the wall. The data was undeniable. And the boss had that specific look in his eye. You know the one. The look of someone who knows they are 100% right and is about to enjoy the final blow. My colleague sat in total silence, ears turning a deep red, just staring fixedly at his keyboard. Now, there was a senior partner in the room who had every reason to jump in. He had the perfect technical argument ready. I could practically see the words forming, the one that would have ended the debate and sealed my colleague's fate. Yeah. But instead he did something that felt like a mistake. He looked at the struggling employee, then at the boss's smug expression, and simply closed his laptop with a quiet final click. "I think we've seen enough for today," he said. "Let's look at this again on Friday." Oh. In that moment, it felt like a total failure of logic. The boss looked frustrated, and the air in the room was just thick with the weight of things left unsaid. From the outside, it looked like the senior partner was being weak or, maybe just avoiding a difficult truth. But as we filtered out of the room, I caught a glimpse of the junior employee's face. And it wasn't just relief. It was a sudden, intense sense of gravity, a debt that didn't need to be spoken. In most of the world, we are taught that being right is the ultimate goal. We are told to state our case, draw our boundaries, and never let an error go uncorrected. But there's a specific Japanese mindset that suggests the moment you have the absolute power to win is exactly when you should choose to step back. It isn't about kindness, and it's certainly not about fear. It's a quiet, almost invisible code called jingi. It is the art of not winning, even when you have every right to, and it might be the only thing keeping your most important relationships from breaking. That opening anecdote, that image of the laptop closing when the senior partner held all the proof, that really captures the essence of what we are analyzing today. Strategic restraint. That choice, the deferral of the discussion, that was a strategic application of Japanese jingi.
Exactly. And the mission for this deep dive is to take that specific moment of restraint and connect it to something much broader, the essential Asian concept of saving face. We're going to explore how choosing silence, or deliberately avoiding an immediate victory, serves as a really sophisticated, long-term tool for sustainable relationship management and for organizational cohesion, really, across the whole Asia-Pacific region. This is, critical knowledge for anyone involved in cross-cultural negotiations or any high-stakes business, particularly when you're dealing with corporate leadership in Japan, Singapore, and Malaysia.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We're diving into cultures where, the preservation of professional face and long-term stability consistently outweighs just winning an argument right now. We're moving beyond the simple concept of being polite and trying to understand that this restraint is, in fact, maybe the smartest strategic move you can make for multi-year success.
That's the key. It's not passive, it's strategic.
So we have to start where this strategic restraint is really codified, Japan. The ultimate goal, the fundamental societal mandate, isn't about individual glory or winning arguments, but about something much more profound. A concept known as wa. What exactly does wa demand of an individual in a professional setting?
Well, wa, or harmony, is really the central organizing principle of Japanese culture. It's a mandate for peaceful unity and conformity within any social group. That could be a family, a community, or a corporation. The rule is pretty simple. The successful continuation of the harmonious community is always prioritized over personal interests, over individual desires, or the immediate achievements of any one person.
So it goes way back, right? This isn't a modern business idea.
Oh, not at all. If you look at the historical root of wa, it was actually formalized as early as the 7th century. It established a precedent that peaceful coexistence is the absolute precondition for any success.
That makes the stakes extremely high. If an individual acts purely in their self-interest, they aren't just being selfish, they are fundamentally threatening the organizational core. So how is this value, wa, enforced in day-to-day life and career advancement? Is it truly a mandatory cultural contract?
It is absolutely mandatory, and the enforcement mechanisms are pervasive. They're everywhere. Anyone who breaks the ideal of wa is disciplined, and this is where the tacit, the covert pressure often proves far more effective than an overt reprimand.
What do you mean by covert pressure?
Well, overt discipline might be a boss shouting at you, which does happen, but covert discipline is the collective cold shoulder. It's the unspoken disapproval from your family or your colleagues. It's being subtly excluded from key decision-making processes. It's a form of social ostracization that can be career limiting, even if your technical work is outstanding.
So the hierarchy itself is less about managerial control in a Western sense and more about social control designed to maintain this equilibrium.
That's a great way to put it. Hierarchical structures within Japanese organizations exist primarily to ensure the continuation of wa. The seniority system, for example, helps minimize open conflict by clearly defining who has the authority to speak and decide. That reduces the opportunity for two people of equal standing to clash publicly. The structure itself is a regulatory mechanism for harmony.
And structurally, we see this baked right into the business practices. You mentioned group-focused incentives. How does rewarding the group, rather than the star individual, function as a tool of social engineering to enforce wa?
It's highly effective. Japanese businesses use practices that foster this strong, almost familial association. While the practice of strict lifetime employment has evolved a bit, that sense of strong communal bonds remains. The most tangible mechanism is how success is recognized. Rewards, bonuses, public recognition, they're typically given to groups, to departments, or even the entire company, rather than strictly to high-performing individuals.
Can you give me an example of that?
Sure. Imagine a scenario where a sales team hits an enormous target. In a low-context, individualistic culture like the US, the top salesperson gets a massive bonus and a plaque, right?
Right. They're on stage at the conference.
Exactly. In a WA-driven company, the team receives the reward. If one person tried to claim individual credit or negotiate a higher personal bonus, they would immediately be seen as prioritizing their own gain over the communal effort. This practice explicitly reinforces group unity and communal success, making individual gain feel isolating and even risky.
It creates a powerful psychological disincentive against standing out, which brings us to one of the most visible manifestations of wa silence. In Western contexts, we interpret silence as discomfort, avoidance, or even guilt. But we are missing its strategic value.
We are missing everything. Japan is the quintessential high-context communication culture. Context is heavily relied upon shared history, mutual understanding, nonverbal cues. This means communication is inherently indirect and the spoken word is often secondary.
So silence, or chinmoku, isn't just empty space, it's loaded with communicative force.
Precisely. Chinmoku, or silence, is regarded not just as a virtue, but as a critical, refined skill. It is one of the most powerful nonverbal means used to transmit complex messages, intentions, or feelings. If a skilled business leader in Tokyo uses chinmoku, they are not avoiding the conversation. They're conducting it using a different, unspoken language.
Where does that come from philosophically?
The roots are deep, primarily stemming from Zen Buddhism, which historically discouraged the use of words and focused instead on silent contemplation. The idea is profound. Enlightenment or true understanding cannot be attained by talking about it. Words suggest distance and potential misunderstanding. If you are truly close enough, if you share that intuitive, deep internal truth, words become unnecessary, or worse, they become an obstruction.
That's fascinating.
It is, and it's why a Japanese speaker might feel no contradiction in saying something polite that doesn't reflect their true feeling. They believe the listener should use intuitive sensitivity to grasp the unspoken truth hidden beneath the surface.
That really flips the script on its head. Silence shows closeness and deep understanding, whereas speaking explicitly or arguing aggressively suggests you are an outsider, or you just lack a fundamental grasp of the relationship.
And this ties directly back into the functions of Holoe. Chinmoku serves several critical social functions. Firstly, it demonstrates impeccable manners and deep respect for hierarchy, especially towards seniors or elders. You're acknowledging their status by not rushing to fill the air with your own voice. Secondly, and most critically for our discussion on strategic restraint, it maintains group harmony and actively avoids conflict.
This is the realm of the hammer and the nail, right?
Absolutely. The cultural proverb, the rokue wa utareru, the nail that sticks out will be hammered down, is a constant, powerful psychological warning. People who insist on making themselves heard, challenging superiors directly, or pushing an explicit agenda are viewed negatively as arrogant or disruptive. Conflict avoidance, therefore, is a massive, almost existential motivator in Japanese communication.
But the sources also make it clear that silence is a double-edged sword. If the senior partner in our opening story had been truly angry or wanted to punish the junior employee, he could have used silence to signal that disapproval. How do you distinguish between respectful chinmoku and deliberate punitive exclusion?
And that is the core difficulty for outsiders. Silence is inherently ambiguous. When people feel angry or disagreed with or wish to punish someone, they will use silence. They'll ignore the other person to hurt them or send a defiant exclusionary message. It can also be employed strategically to conceal facts, to protect a vulnerable position, or simply when someone feels guilty.
So it's all about the context.
It's all context. The ambiguity means that skilled Japanese listeners must rely on a very high-level paralinguistic skill, sashi. Sashi is the ability to intuitively guess what a person is inferring to correctly interpret the silence. You are reading the body language, the microexpressions, the context of the relationship, the timing, the specific tension in the air, all to determine if the silence is respectful, thoughtful, evasive, or hostile. This is a skill honed over decades within the culture.
Okay, so if the truth is, as they say, in the belly, and words are secondary, how do senior leaders achieve this unspoken, intuitive understanding that's required for complex business decisions? Especially when they can't rely on explicit contracts or detailed verbal instructions.
That is the realm of haragai. It literally translates to belly art or belly performance. This is the mutual understanding achieved exclusively through nonverbal means. The belly, or hara, is philosophically considered the source of a person's truthfulness and intuitive wisdom. It contrasts sharply with the outer realm of speech, the kuchi or guchi, which can be deceitful or merely superficial.
So they're communicating, belly to belly.
In a manner of speaking, yes. When executives engage in haragai, they are communicating their innermost intentions and commitment non-verbally. This often happens during long silences in meetings, through subtle shifts in posture, or during social rituals like sharing sake. This is critical in high-stakes decisions. If a senior leader commits to a risky deal using haragai, that unspoken commitment is often viewed as stronger than any contract clause because it stems from their hara, their core truth.
I find the related concept so fascinating. If haragai is the performance of the truth, what about the idea of communication through shared transmission?
Those concepts really fill out the implicit communication picture. We have ishindenshin, which is often translated as communication through telepathy.
Telepathy.
It sounds mystical, but it's really about shared unspoken transmission, where two people simply know what the other thinks or intends without a single word being exchanged. This concept suggests that a deep, productive professional relationship is one where you anticipate and understand your partner's needs before they even vocalize them.
And what was the other one? The listener's skill.
Right. That's enryasashi. That's the term for the intuitive sensitivity required by the listener. It describes their ability to guess what is being inferred or intended without explicit speech. A successful junior employee is often judged not on how well they execute tasks, but on their ability to anticipate the manager's unspoken needs through enryosashi. If you can master haragai and sashi, then silence becomes an exceptionally successful way to communicate true, unspoken emotions and strategies within the group.
We absolutely must address face itself then. We've established that the senior partner closing his laptop was an act of jingi strategic restraint to save face. But the sources show that the figurative sense of face in Japanese is incredibly complex. It's divided into at least 4 separate yet related aspects. Let's slow down and delineate the subtle differences here.
It is a layered concept for sure. We start with the broadest umbrella term, cow. This literally means face, but it encompasses all the figurative face meanings. It's a person's reputation, public social influence, and prestige derived from fame or being a visible, acknowledged representative of a group. This is the general reservoir of social standing.
Okay, so cow is the big picture. What's next?
Next is mensu. This relates specifically to the public image one wants to present within a specific social framework, and it emphasizes social roles. For example, a CEO has a certain mensu to maintain in front of shareholders. Mensu is often about outward appearance and maintaining status derived from success and power. If that colleague in your story was publicly humiliated, his mensu would be immediately damaged because he failed to maintain the appearance of professional competence within his social role.
So mensu is tied closely to your professional status and how you perform your job in public view.
Exactly, but it's distinct from the 2 older, more character-focused forms of face. The third term is menboku. This is often glossed as the approved self. This is face derived from aspects approved of by others, rooted deeply in one's quality of character meo, and the reputation gained from the public gaze, the seiken. Menboku requires genuine moral conduct and fulfilling one's obligations.
Okay, help us distinguish mensu from menboku. If I buy an expensive car, that gives me mensu, that status. But does it affect my menboku?
That's a perfect distinction. The expensive car provides mensu visible status, wealth, and power. But if you bought that car by cheating your business partner, your menboku, your approved moral character, would be destroyed. In a business context, menboku is closely tied to fulfilling one's duties honorably, showing integrity, and demonstrating professional conduct aligned with group expectations. Loss of menboku is far more damaging than loss of mensu.
And the last one.
And finally, we have teimen, the projected self, or ostentation. This concerns the external appearance, or teisai, and maintaining conduct appropriate to the business environment. Teimen focuses on conforming to expectations, using the proper honorifics, maintaining a professional appearance through good quality clothing, and perhaps most importantly, protecting the company's reputation as a whole by ensuring your behavior reflects well on your organization.
So menboku is your inner character being approved, and teimen is your outer presentation conforming to professional and social expectations. We often focus globally on losing face, but the concept of gaining face or giving face is highly strategic in Japan.
Oh, giving face is perhaps one of the most underrated strategic tools. Expressions like kao o tataru, to build up or erect face, are used constantly to give face to superiors or colleagues. In your opening anecdote, the senior partner's jingi act saved the junior colleague's mensu, his professional standing, and his menboku, his character integrity within the group. In return, the junior employee now has a massive unspoken obligation, a debt to the senior partner. The senior partner has gained face, not by winning, but through an act of strategic self-restraint and generosity.
So how is this done in practice?
It can be achieved through highly institutionalized methods in business. Compliments, for instance, especially those admiring a colleague's business acumen, or acknowledging the visible signs of their success, the luxury items they possess, or common methods. Gift giving is also crucial, often done mid-year or at year-end, which expresses gratitude for past favors and reinforces that vertical obligational relationship.
That layered understanding of Japanese face kao, mensu, menboku, teimen, it shows us that strategic restraint is a highly sophisticated, multifaceted practice. Okay, so let's pivot from that and look at the larger universal sociological concept of face that connects Japan to the wider Asia-Pacific region.
Right. At its core, face is defined sociologically as a class of behaviors and customs tied to morality, honor, and dignity. It represents the prestige and respect an individual or group enjoys within social relationships. And face is not a static quantity. It has to be constantly attended to. It can be lost, maintained, or dramatically enhanced.
While the way face is expressed varies wildly from culture to culture, the concern for maintaining it is considered a sociological constant across all cultures.
Yes, exactly. The concern for face is sociologically invariant or universal, though what constitutes face is culturally specific. What's particularly interesting is that the English language itself owes its understanding of prestige honor face to a direct semantic loan from Chinese. The phrase lose face, for instance, comes specifically from the Chinese du lian. This just highlights the foundational role Chinese concepts play in defining this whole cross-cultural dynamic.
And the Chinese differentiation of face is crucial for understanding the high-stakes pressure points in the region. Let's drill down on the distinction between mianzi and lian.
This duality is essential. Mianzi is the external, public prestige and reputation achieved through visible markers of success, wealth, power, and ostentation. It's entirely linked to the concept of keeping up appearances. You can think of it as social capital earned through achievement.
Okay, so it's about looking successful.
It is. In modern terms, mianzi is the driving force behind conspicuous consumption. Consumers buying high-end, conspicuous brands are doing so to communicate achievement, particularly in upper-class business circles. There's a strong emotional component. People feel pride, honor, a certain vanity from having brand mianzi. When a business deal collapses, the public failure is a loss of mianzi.
But the deeper moral dimension is lian.
Correct. Lian is the moral reputation and respect earned from the group for having good moral character, for fulfilling obligations, showing decency, and acting with integrity. Lian is not about status, it's about worthiness. If you break a fundamental promise, steal from a colleague, or act dishonorably, you lose lian. And the loss of lian is the most severe condemnation that can be made of a person. It implies a fundamental lack of character from which it is nearly impossible to recover. Loss of mianzi is painful, but loss of lian is catastrophic.
That duality explains why, in my opening story, the senior partner's restraint was so powerful. By preventing the colleague from being exposed for his technical mistake, he saved the colleague's mensu, the Japanese version of status, and potentially his menboku, his character, thus protecting his long-term viability in the firm.
Exactly. He demonstrated Jingi, protecting the junior colleague's worthiness and status within the group, and in doing so, he strengthened the relationship and the entire organizational structure. This strategic need for subtlety brings us back to the question, why is this level of implicit understanding required in some places and not others?
And this is where that whole idea of high context versus low context cultures really clicks, right?
It does. Edward T. Hall's framework is perfect here. High context, or HC cultures, Japan, China, Korea, Indonesia, Thailand, they rely heavily on implicit communication. Meaning is often internalized within the participants or the physical context itself. These cultures are inherently collectivist, relationship-focused, and they operate on what are called restricted codes, where a common background allows for implicit, subtle meaning. The senior partner and junior colleague in your story shared a restricted code.
And the flip side is low context.
Right. Low context, or LC cultures, like the US, Germany, Switzerland, are the opposite. Communication is explicit, direct, and elaborate. Meaning is vested almost entirely in the words spoken, requiring elaborated codes to ensure zero misunderstanding. These cultures are typically individualistic and transactional.
The implication for a Western manager entering this high-context environment is stark. You have to immediately switch from an elaborated, precise code to an intuitive, restricted code.
The difference manifests dramatically in conflict resolution. Studies comparing U.S. low-context managers with Chinese and Korean high-context managers show that the HC groups consistently score lower in confrontation.
So they're less likely to argue.
Much less likely to directly challenge or argue, and they scored significantly higher in social orientation. Their goal in a dispute is relationship preservation, not necessarily technical victory.
So what does that mean for negotiation styles?
Well, further research on conflict styles found that HC nations, like India and Thailand, overwhelmingly prefer avoiding and obliging conflict styles, where you yield to maintain the relationship. In contrast, LC nations, like Ireland and the US, preferred uncompromising and dominating styles. So if you, as a low-context individual, enter a high-context negotiation with an uncompromising style,
you're in trouble.
You aren't just losing the argument, you are likely destroying the future relationship entirely.
This inherent connection between communication style and conflict avoidance reinforces that strategic restraint is a default setting in HC nations and is fundamentally tied to identity.
It is. In HC cultures, the concept of face or self-image is oriented heavily toward social identity and group consciousness. This is a massive distinction from individualistic Western interpretations of face, where identity is centered on autonomy and personal achievement. In HC settings, language and communication are primarily used to assist and maintain relationships.
So when our senior partner closed his laptop, he wasn't just helping an individual. He was preserving the entire team's structural integrity, reinforcing the collective social identity.
Exactly. And this collectivistic identity focus is even reflected in organizational structures, particularly in Japanese leadership models. Leadership is not seen as the individual leader imposing their will, but rather as influence that's integrated into the leader-follower relationship, focusing on strengthening the collective culture.
Is there a specific model for that?
There is. Consider the Mikoshi leadership model, named after the divine palanquin carried during festivals. The Mikoshi, representing the top manager, is respected and carries the spirit of the company. But it is entirely powerless unless it is carried by the people, middle management, and employees. The leader's principal function is to ensure consensus and help middle management achieve communal goals, moving where the group consensus directs them. The people carrying the Mikoshi must move in uniform steps, sharing the difficulties and happiness through uniformity, conformity, and harmony. This is the ultimate visible reflection of the social identity focus.
I wonder how often Western executives misinterpret that leadership style, seeing the deference of the CEO to the group as weakness, rather than understanding that his influence is maximized only through this consensus-driven, harmonious movement.
It happens all the time.
We've established the deep cultural foundation of restraint in Japan and its sociological basis across Asia. Now let's make this actionable for business leaders operating in the highly dynamic and multi-ethnic environments of Singapore and Malaysia. The strategic application of this Jingi-style restraint is absolutely crucial here, but I imagine it takes on slightly different flavors.
It does. In both Singapore and Malaysia, showing humility and respect is highly valued. The core imperative remains the same: maintain harmonious relationships and save face, both yours and your counterparts. That confident, aggressive, or confrontational style that might work in a Western boardroom is generally interpreted as impolite, crude, and potentially dangerous to the relationship in these settings. You must project an even temperament, listen patiently, and never interrupt or overtly show off your superior knowledge.
And this commitment to face mandates the necessity of finding a win-win outcome. Why is mutual gain so non-negotiable in this region?
Because face preservation is paramount. Mutual gains are essential for successful negotiation and, critically, for successful implementation. The negotiation should never be viewed as a zero-sum game where you extract the maximum possible value for yourself. You have to genuinely focus on your counterpart's interests, ensuring the outcome clearly benefits them as well.
What happens if you don't?
If you push too hard and force a counterpart to accept a terrible deal, you cause them to lose face, which guarantees friction, resistance, and difficulty in all future collaborations. A win-win approach ensures everyone leaves the table feeling respected and obligated to the success of the partnership, which is the vital foundation for long-term implementation.
Given the immense diversity in societies like Singapore and Malaysia, how important is that deep, personal relationship building?
It is the currency of doing business. Because you are dealing with diverse, multi-ethnic groups, tailoring your approach to suit the individual is highly valued. Negotiations usually occur over a series of meetings, often revolving around meals or social settings. Keeping track of personal details, hobbies, family updates, personal preferences, negotiation quirks is extremely valuable.
It's not just small talk then.
It's data. These tidbits allow you to establish deep rapport and adapt your communication flexibly, showing that you value the person, not just the transaction. This relationship-first approach is the strategic prerequisite to moving into formal agreements.
One of the biggest pitfalls for outsiders is deciphering the indirect no. It's an act of jingi, really, to avoid delivering a direct rejection, but how do we decode that ambiguity?
You have to assume ambiguity signals an unfavorable outcome. A direct no is harsh and actively avoided because it causes a clear loss of face for the person making the request. Even a simple yes may not mean I agree, but rather, I heard what you said, or I understand the request. This is why documentation is key later, but early in the relationship, you have to rely on the nonverbal cues.
What are some of the specific phrases that sound like hesitation, but actually signal a polite decline that saves face?
They often sound like deferral or generalized good intentions. We'll think about it later. This needs further study. We'll see how things progress. Or the classic, it might be difficult. These phrases are almost always polite declines. The use of silence itself, if the response is delayed or vague, is also a function of polite decline, maintaining harmony while avoiding conflict.
But there's a flip side to that, isn't there?
There is, and it's a surprising strategic insight. Because indirectness is the norm, the rare occasion when you receive a clear, unambiguous no in Singapore or Malaysia should actually be seen as a gift. It's clear disinterest that avoids the ambiguity, allowing you to move on quickly without wasting time pursuing a dead end or guessing what they really meant.
That's a fascinating reframing. Now let's tackle the crucial distinction between Singapore and Malaysia. They're geographically close, yet vastly different in business rhythms. This comparison illustrates the subtle, strategic shifts a business leader must master. Let's start with the foundational governance that shapes the negotiation rhythm.
This is where we need to be, as I call it, bilingual in trust. Singapore operates on standardized trust. Trust is built into the rigid, transparent system itself. It relies on strong contracts, swift judicial enforcement, and a reputation for strict regulatory adherence and low corruption. This standardization is what accelerates transactional speed. Singapore rewards clarity, data-backed arguments, and strict adherence to documented processes because the system itself guarantees reliability.
Malaysia, in contrast, prioritizes the personal connection.
Yes. Malaysia operates on personalized trust. The context is different. Policy is often tempered by complex social and ethnic concerns, which means that navigating regulatory guidance frequently involves multiple government or semi-government agencies. Successful navigation absolutely requires strong personal relationships or perhubungan to facilitate the process. Malaysia rewards patience, trust building, and respectful engagement with hierarchy because outcomes often rely on the strength of personal commitment and the willingness of individuals to smooth the administrative path.
So let's break down the cultural negotiation table. How do these differing approaches manifest in a meeting? Starting with, say, punctuality and trust currency.
In Malaysia, the rhythm is flexible and relational. Time is considered secondary to building the necessary rapport. Meetings almost always begin with lengthy small talk and lateral discussions to establish comfort. Their trust currency is rapport and referrals. Trust is built outside the boardroom over tea or lunch, often leveraging mutual contacts. This personal trust, crucially, acts as the lubricant that accelerates formal approvals later in the process.
Then Singapore.
Singapore, by stark contrast, is strict and transactional. Time is explicitly valued as money. Meetings start on time, end on time, and stick rigidly to the agenda. Small talk is usually minimal and functional. Their trust currency is proof and track record. Trust must be earned via clean credentials, exhaustive data-backed arguments, logic, and proven performance in past engagements.
That structural difference must profoundly change the decision flow. If I am negotiating a licensing agreement, where does the power lie?
In Malaysia, decisions are consensus-driven and hierarchical. The person you negotiate with may be influential, but they are rarely the final decision maker. Decisions consolidate at the top, often after several levels of internal consultation to maintain organizational harmony. Protecting the ultimate decision maker's face is paramount throughout this consensus process.
And in Singapore, you're more likely to have the decision maker in the room.
Much more likely. In Singapore, it's about clarity and accountability. Decision makers are often present, or their final decision logic is clearly articulated. The hierarchy is functional and focused purely on who is accountable for specific operational outcomes. The system facilitates a faster, more explicit decision, provided the data supports your proposal.
And even the language of no differs subtly between these close neighbors.
It does. While both are high context, in Malaysia, the no is characterized by indirectness and gentleness. The soft can try, we'll see, or, most commonly, silence, utilized specifically to maintain harmony. In Singapore, the no is generally much more explicit and structured than in Malaysia. It will often be backed by data, a defined regulatory limitation, or a precise logical counterargument. This relative explicitness allows both parties to understand the reasoning and move forward quickly, maintaining that transactional speed.
The strategic takeaway, then, is that successful negotiation in this corridor requires mastering a dual language of trust.
Absolutely. Effective negotiators must be bilingual in trust. You need the ability to define the deal using the precise, data-driven, and procedural framework of Singapore, that straight-line efficiency that respects the value of time. But simultaneously, you have to apply the soft, patient, relational warmth, the perhubungan focus of Malaysia, to ensure the deal's long-term implementation and success. You have to recognize that the personal commitment of key individuals is what truly guarantees the future partnership.
We've taken a comprehensive journey into the art of strategic restraint. We began with that powerful anecdote illustrating the Japanese code of Jingi, the strategic choice not to win, and showed that this is rooted in the deep cultural value of wa, of harmony. This restraint manifests through chinmoku, or silence, and the subtle communication of harge, all in service of protecting face, which, as we learned, is a complex system involving both public status, mensu, and inner character, memboku.
We then connected that foundation to the sociological understanding of face and the high-context nature of Asian communication, where collective identity and relationship maintenance are prioritized over individual clarity or dominance. This approach is reflected in organizational structures like the consensus-driven Mikoshi leadership model, and is practically applied in business environments across Southeast Asia. And that necessitates a strategic mastery of the distinct trust currencies and negotiation rhythms of, say, Singapore with its standardized trust and Malaysia with its personalized trust. I think the deep dive reveals that in these highly relational cultures, the concept of face is far more than a fragile ego. It is the fundamental mechanism for organizational cohesion and transactional stability. It is the ultimate expression of valuing a sustainable network over a momentary adversarial victory. The strategic choice to step back when you are 100% right fundamentally changes the dynamic from a one-time transaction to a long-term mutually obligating partnership. You now understand that knowing when not to use the undeniable data is often the most critical management skill of all for achieving success in the Asia-Pacific region.
That's the end of our deep dive.